NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre is suing Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharpe for defamation in relation to comments they made about this alleged situation where Brett Favre essentially defrauded the neediest people in the state of Mississippi out of relief money. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, back in 2020, the state of Mississippi discovered that there were $77 million of funds from an emergency assistance for needy families fund that it didn't go to needy families, but instead went into the pockets of the rich. One of those people, allegedly, was in fact NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre, who received $1.1 million in these funds for speeches he made. Brett Favre has since paid back that money. However, there are discussions about him paying interest payments in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that have now involved lawsuits, and it's gotten really messy in there. And of course, in covering this, you have Shannon Sharpe and Pat McAfee now kind of caught in the crossfire here because both of them made comments in the past about Brett Favre and the situation, and now Favre and his team apparently don't like it, so they sued Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharpe. Once again, I had to say that because I still can't believe it. So here's the thing. According to the suit, McAfee called Favre, quote, a thief who was, quote, stealing from the poor in Mississippi on his Pat McAfee show. Favre is suing him for making defamatory comments and then on top of that, profiting from those comments. And here's what I will say. Pat McAfee addressed this on his show earlier today. And if there was a level of could not give a crap, like less than like zero, Pat McAfee's on that level. He does not care at all about this. He was joking about this for the entire segment he was talking about it. He talked about how he originally thought that this was a joke, that he got a letter that said, you need to remove this video because it involves defamatory comments. And Pat McAfee just kind of laughed it off because he was like, this is not real, right? Brett Favre's not suing me. And then he got another letter telling him to go on his show and apologize for those comments, which he didn't do. And he thought that was even sillier. So you have that. In Shannon Sharpe's case, Favre is suing him for comments that he made on Skip and Shannon Undisputed on FS1, where he said, quote, sorry, mofo, to steal money. He called Brett Favre, a sorry mofo for stealing money from the lowest of the low. Yeah, quote, he stole money from people that really needed that money. Of course, right now there's still an investigation ongoing. Brett Favre was implicated in this investigation, and alleged stealing from the poorest of poor and the neediest of the needy aside, this is big news in the sports like broadcasting world and the general sports media sphere, because you usually don't see something like this, right? Every day we see people go and make comments very similar to this about the news, right? And very little happens. And that's because many times you can't really prove like full-on defamation. And again, I'm not a legal expert. However, what I will say is, from my knowledge of defamation suits and how these usually go, I don't believe either Pat McAfee or Shannon Sharpe should be afraid of legitimately losing or being found like guilty in that case, or being found liable in that case, I should say. I think Brett Favre is just kind of doing this, and his team is doing this mainly, in my opinion, they're doing this to just kind of scare people from talking about the alleged scheme here, the alleged fraud here that he allegedly committed, where he allegedly stole money that was supposed to go towards the neediest families of the state of Mississippi, allegedly. So it's obviously quite a mess, and honestly, I'm commenting on it, and I have commented on it before. I will say this: if what Brett Favre is being accused of and implicated in is true, shame on him. because this isn't just a thing of, oh, you took money that wasn't yours or wasn't earmarked for you. This speaks to the larger corruption that rots throughout the entire world. Honestly, governments throughout the entire world, companies throughout the entire world, where we see that even when money is put aside for the poorest of the poor and the neediest of the needy, they always find a way, they being the rich and the powerful, always find a way to make sure those funds come back to them. Because, and sometimes, and this isn't just a Brett Favre thing, this is a larger societal, global thing that we deal with, right? Where you have this corruption on so many levels, and it penetrates so many levels of the government. And a lot of times, the people who need that money the most, the people who need the help the most, are the ones who are most drastically affected by it. And again, we can talk about Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharpe in perspective, like being, being a little bit victimized or whatever. But what they're going to go through with this lawsuit and probably have to show up to court and like pay some money in legal fees, which both of them can afford. And I'm sure even like FS1 or Pat McAfee's sponsors might even just pay outright for their legal fees, because this just sounds stupid as hell what Brett Favre is doing, in my opinion. But more than them, right? This whole story, because this is not just Brett Favre who was implicated in this. I believe Ted DiBiase, the former wrestler, was also implicated in this same or a similar scandal. It speaks to the cultural rot and the corruption that still runs rampant, even at a time where the most neediest among us were suffering. More so than we have in our modern times during the COVID-19 pandemic. There were rampant layoffs, millions of people got kicked off their health care, and on top of that, millions of people lost their jobs and suffered the financial impact of that, lost their homes. And in a state like Mississippi, where there is a whole lot of income inequality, we saw that there were people who thought that money somehow belonged, that money that was earmarked for the poor was somehow belonged in the hands of the rich. And again, not going to retread this because I've been speaking for nearly 8 minutes now about it. But at the end of the day, what will happen here? Likely a whole lot of nothing. They're going to go to court. It's going to be a long, drawn-out process. And I think at the end of the day, the real reason, in my opinion, that Brett Favre's team want to do this is to scare people from talking about it and scare people from covering this story, which is a massive story. Because you have Brett Favre, one of the biggest and most beloved quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, whose highlight tape everyone loves to watch, who is one of the most entertaining, like make or break quarterbacks ever. And it's a fall from grace after he already was involved in a few scandals before this. And I don't know, man. To me, it just seems like one of those things where they're just trying to get people to stop talking about it. That's why we shouldn't stop trying to talk about his alleged scandal here. Let me know what you guys think, though, in the comment section below. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released.